the reason why a crisis does not override inalienable rights is because, first of all, and now just again zoom out from what's actually happening and just think in these general terms. Okay, you have a crisis on one hand and you have inalienable rights on the other hand. So if someone declares a crisis and then also says, I need to violate your inalienable rights now. Now just, again, a big picture here, humans on the planet Earth throughout history, one possibility that has certainly occurred in the past and could occur in the future is that the person saying, oh, there's this crisis, so I need to, take control of your life and resources and whatever else. The premise of anytime anyone declares a crisis, they can then do whatever they want to anyone, that's not a good premise, right? You got to think about it on that person-to-person level. Like, would this be legitimate if just someone on the street came up to you and said, oh, hey, there's this crisis going on, so I need to, be aggressive towards you in some manner, right? Like, that wouldn't be legitimate on that person in the street level. The problem is most people can't carry that understanding to the social level. They think something changes when it's not just a person on the street and it's so-called experts and authority figures, talking to them through their electronic devices. They think all of a sudden it's a little different now when it's actually not. So that's number one. The person who declares the crisis could be lying. And so if they're declaring a crisis while simultaneously saying, and because of this crisis, I need to do some aggressive things to you, that's not legitimate, right? Or that's something to be wary of because they could be lying. That is a possibility, right? Okay, number two, maybe there is a real crisis going on. And so, but then this same person, let's get back to something people can handle more readily before their Stockholm syndrome and statism kicks in. Someone just comes up to you on the street and says, oh, did you know there's this crisis going on? And you say, oh yeah, actually I have heard it and seen it. Yeah, it's a real crisis. And they say, okay, well, this is what I think is the solution. It includes me being aggressive towards you, and this is, so you basically just have to accept my abuse, accept my aggression, accept my control, accept these restrictions, whatever I want to do to you, do to your body, whatever I want to do to you economically, you just pretty much have to go along with it. Again, if that was just someone on the street, you wouldn't accept it. You would agree with them that yes, there is a real crisis, but you wouldn't agree with them being able to then take over your life and commit aggression against you, right? Because, and why is that? You might respond, well, because who are they? Who are they to, be the authority over my life? And who are they to be the authority on the best way to handle this crisis, right? So in that case, it's not a deception. There is a real crisis. But maybe there's two possibilities as far as what's going on in that other person's head who's trying to push the abuse. One, they could be innocent in the sense that they really think that what they think is the solution. They really believe 100% like that this really would help the crisis. But yeah, it's still not legitimate because just because you really believe your form of abuse is going to save the world, that doesn't mean that we all have to just accept whatever you come up with as the solution, right? But secondly, they could use the real crisis for their advantage, meaning like, yes, okay, there is this real crisis going on, and what they're offering, and they're offering something as a solution, air quote solution, but they know it's not a real solution. They just want to take advantage of the situation for their own selfish means, right? It's like maybe there's a natural disaster and then someone comes in and says, oh, you all have to purchase my whatever, to keep you safe, right? Maybe you don't actually really need what they're selling, but they're pushing it on you, feigning compassion when really they just want to deceive you and gain wealth or power off of the crisis, right? They're, you know, a modern term you may have heard, ambulance chaser, right? Like a lawyer chasing an ambulance, right? Like they're not really so concerned about the person in the ambulance. They're just thinking, well, how can I make a buck off of this, right? So that does happen, right? So you have to have some space in your brain to be open to the possibility. I'm not saying you have to believe this. I'm just saying you have to, concerning the current situation, I'm just saying you have to consider these as possibilities. These are things that sometimes humans do to other humans, you know. Sometimes they make up a crisis for their own advantage. Sometimes a crisis happens and then they start pushing things they think are the solution when they're really not a good idea, and they don't really have the right to be pushing it on people whether it's a good idea or not, because they're not the master of everyone, you know, and everyone they shout out or command, you know, are not their slaves, right? That's not the actual social reality. It's not legitimate. Just have that understanding that there are a few things that actually are purely bad. It's not like always a gray area. Abuse is actually never good. So they're pushing, you know, higher numbers again, and simultaneously pushing further restriction, further abuse, further violation of inalienable rights. So they're counting on you believing that if the crisis is large enough, well then we can take away your inalienable rights. A rational man or woman should not ever accept the violation of their inalienable rights in a crisis. And this is what I'm calling the thought crime of the year, the thought crime of 2020. And it's just really interesting to me that, like, anytime I've tried to share this in the past, it's like, it seems to have fallen on deaf ears. It's just like, it's like a stone thrown in a lake. It just, you know, disappears, plop, gone, and, you know, in one ear, out the other. And it doesn't seem to really register with folks. And I think that's in large part currently due to the media's manipulation, the emotional manipulation, the guilt tripping, and the deception of it, right? Just appealing to emotion, trying to keep you distracted from the fact that what's actually going on fundamentally underneath this whole show is they're just moving forward with further control and abuse. They're just moving forward with totalitarianism. They're just moving forward with violating your inalienable rights. What are your inalienable rights? You may have heard, you know, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as being some of our inalienable rights. But to make that more succinct, we could just say the right to not be abused, right? The right to not be abused. I don't know if I was reading or listening to someone talking from a Christian perspective about the enemy, and they said, you know, two main tools of the enemy, the devil, is sickness and abuse, right? Sickness and violence. They're both bad things, right? And, you know, bad plus bad doesn't equal better. It equals worse, right? I mean, and it's just so basic. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like the truth is so simple, but yet, you know, bad plus bad equals worse, right? Like, if you told that to a 5-year-old, they would say, yeah, of course. But the problem is with, you know, so-called educated adults or miseducated adults, you know. Bob Marley said, you know, educated fools. They don't even recognize what's bad. So they can't make that simple addition of 1 plus 1. So they have you confused about what's bad in the first place, so you can't even make that simple addition there. You can't even make that simple evaluation that, yes, a sickness is bad, but so is abuse. Abuse doesn't make sickness better. It doesn't make the situation better, right?